I can't believe you've played 100 tests. Amazing.
I know it seems to have come around quite quickly. I don't know when the time's gone. It feels like yesterday walking out in Nagpur. So hopefully it's not near the end of the journey. There's plenty more games to come and plenty more fantastic memories to make. But yeah, very excited for this week.
Yeah. Can you remember how you felt when you walked out? It was an important game, that, wasn't it? And you were kind of suddenly pulled in, a bit of a change of the balance, but England needing not to lose that to win a series there for so long.
Yeah, I mean, once I walked out, I'd sort of completely forgot the situation of the game and the magnitude of it. I was just so overwhelmed and happy and just enjoying that moment. They get the opportunity to play for England, to play Test cricket, to be walking out. Kevin Peterson stood at the other end. I just couldn't stop smiling. And I'd take a little bit of time just to like refocus and just sort of think, well, stop thinking about the fact that Sachin Tendulkar stood at mid-off and that Kevin Peterson, who I'd grown up watching, stood at the other end, and just really focus on the job in hand. And thankfully managed to stay out there for a bit of time and help us, get across the line.
Yeah. You looked very young too. I mean, when you look back, didn't you? I mean, you angelic smile and very slight.
Yeah. Hopefully that continues. Hopefully I can stay looking young when I get to your age, I guess. But,
you've lost the smile.
I've lost. It's weathered me having to speak to you all these years, but hopefully, I can still stay on the younger side of things. But it's a lot of time's passed since then. There's been a lot of things happen, and as I say, hopefully this is just part of the journey. And then there's plenty more to come after this.
Yeah. How much have you changed as a person, do you think? I mean, not talk about physically yet, but when you settled into the side, you have got a good sense of humour and you like a laugh, and you were there with your Bob Willis impersonations, but now you're captain. I mean, I've seen a change when I talk to you and I have to interview you with things. It seemed as if you have had to change a bit yourself, at least publicly.
Well, yeah, I still want to have fun. I still want to enjoy my cricket, and something that that's one thing when things aren't going well is just to try and remember what it was like that first time I walked out. Remember what it was like being 10-year-olds playing in the nets at Abbeydale Sports Club, or on the driveway and garden with my brother. The enjoyment that I get from the game is still there, and I just more than anything want to keep embracing that as much as possible. Of course, throughout your career, you grow up, you mature outside of the game, and your life moves on outside and away from cricket, but within the game as well. I think you mature as a player, and that comes through experiences, experiencing different moments, dealing with disappointment, dealing with elation, and thankfully I've had some wonderful teammates that have been there along the journey with me, and been able to share those great moments, and as well to lean on in the difficult times as well. So ultimately, that's probably one of the most enjoyable things about the game is sharing it all with the guys around you.
Yeah. And when someone like Dan Lawrence makes his debut in Sri Lanka, I mean, do you hark back to that first walking out at Nagpur, which clearly was a bit of a dream for you? I mean, do you sit down and talk to the newcomers now and lean on your experience of that first match?
Well, you try and offer a little bit of advice, but you also are very aware that there's so many people, either not necessarily giving them advice, but wishing them well. And as an individual, you're just trying to prepare yourself. So I think more than anything, you watch with interest to see how they handle it. It was great to see Dan go about it exactly how he did. I thought he held himself magnificently. So. It does take you back yourself as a player when you see someone receive that first cap and that smile on their face and all of the hard work that's gone into that moment. And it's a really nice thing to be a part of, seeing someone get that opportunity, and hopefully they make the most of it.
Yeah. How are your family going to be feeling this week, do you think? I mean, they love their cricket, they love following you around. They can't be there obviously this time, which is a shame.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be extremely proud. They'll be excited to watch the cricket, and a lot of what's happened and me getting to this stage is down to them. The hours that they put into taking me to training sessions, not just my parents, my grandparents as well, and my brother too. The amount of test matches we played in the back garden on the driveway, all of it together. It's nice to be able to enjoy moments like this with them.
Yeah. Were you always quite competitive as brothers? And I wonder how he looks at your. I mean, he's obviously had a successful career himself, but he's not captain of England. How did that play out as brothers?
We always had a strong rivalry. Not in a bad way. That I think that competitive element between the two of us is probably what helped us become better players. I think it's a big part of the sport. You've got to have that competitive edge. You've got to want to get in a contest. And from being a really small kid, both of us have always had that. So he's made a fine career for himself. It must be quite difficult being compared to an England captain or someone playing for England. But I think he deals with it extremely well. And I think his best years are still to come.
How did it feel a bit cruel maybe when you actually hit him for 6 at that time at Trent Bridge, one of the only times you actually played against each other?
Yeah, well, he'd given me some verbal, so I was quite pleased that I had to wait for the right ball. I was terrified of getting out to him, but thankfully he bowled me an absolute rank long up, and the field was up. So I had to drive him home that evening as well. So he was pretty quiet in the car, but it's a really nice thing to be able to play against each other. It was quite a strange occasion, and actually the first fixture of the summer is Yorkshire v Glamorgan, so hopefully that'll be another opportunity to do the same.
About your parents, was it quite difficult for them to have two sort of very promising young lads to take around to games, to coach, to get them ready for weekends and so on? I mean, to have one might be quite hard, but I wonder how they split their times between you.
Yeah, I mean, for a large proportion of our childhood, we went and watched Dad play on a Saturday and Sunday. We'd be in the nets. We'd be at his training sessions playing on the side. So for a large proportion, it was spent watching him play and watching that Sheffield Collegiate side all around the Yorkshire leagues. And then when it started to come to games, Bill was a fantastic player as a youngster, and he played a lot of age up cricket. As a youngster, he'd come in and play my age group. So a lot of the time we'd be playing in the same teams, and that's they're great memories as well. Looking back, playing with family members and things, but it must have been very challenging trying to split time and organise getting to different games and such. That's where we're very grateful to have people so invested in giving us opportunity, not just in cricket but in other sports as well. I know I was extremely lucky to have a family that were more than willing to provide those opportunities and give me every chance of success, but also because they knew how much I love playing sport.
Yeah, and it is difficult getting that line right, isn't it? Especially as sort of pushy parents and all that. Too much coaching, too much shouting, too much expectation. Trying to, in the father's line, maybe sort of trying to live his career in yours, and seeing, when did your dad stop sort of coaching, if you like, and saying, okay, I've got to let this boy go now, and there are others who will take him on?
He still tries now every now but he stops himself. He does stop himself. But no, he was obviously a big influence in my career. I think once I started working with Kevin Sharp at Yorkshire, from being about 12, 13 years old, he sort of understood that he was going to have a big influence on my career, and he just wanted me to do well. He wanted Bill to do well, and like I say, he just created opportunities for us to do that. Spent time throwing countless balls at us in the nets, and I couldn't ask for any more from them. They've been amazing.
Just one about Kevin Sharp, I've always been intrigued about. I mean, I played against Kevin a lot, and he was mad. I mean, beautifully eccentric and a very good friend of mine. But it's interesting, he's clearly a very good coach. I wonder what it was about Kevin that you saw that as an opposing bowler, I wouldn't necessarily have seen in Kevin the player.
I think a lot of players turn out to be very different as coaches. I'd still say Kevin is quite eccentric, but and I think always will be. But I think the way he spoke about batting, to me, from even being a really young kid, it resonated with me really early on, and we had a really good relationship from the start. He obviously saw something in me and wanted to help and work with me, and he had a very good way of understanding my game and me as a person as well. There are a number of occasions where things wouldn't be going well for me, and he would just keep smiling at me and just saying, it'll turn. The good Lord's just testing you, it'll turn. That was his little phrase that he used all the time. And I was fortunate to get opportunities. I think you do need that little bit of luck and that little bit of backing if you're going to be successful. And thankfully, Kevin saw that in me.
And 100 tests on, and all these runs, and you're on the leading run scorers of all time, and so on. Do you still need to go back? Are there still times where you really have to look hard at your game, even now, and try and change things, put things right, cut out habits that might have crept in, whatever it might be?
All the time. I think as soon as you start standing still as a batter, the rest of the world will, or the opposition will catch up. There's so much information now, so many trends and different things that teams can look at, and the more you play, the more evidence there is. So I think it's really important that you evolve with the game. The game's always changing, whether that's the impact of the other formats. But Test cricket will always challenge you in different ways. There'll be new guys come on the scene that you've never seen before, even if you're an experienced player. There'll be also guys who have got you out a number of different times and overcoming that mental hurdle and that barrier that wasn't necessarily there in the past. So there's always a different challenge. There's always something there that will test you, along with even media scrutiny at times. Being able to manage that, whether it's ex-players that you really respect going through your game and picking it to pieces. It's all part and parcel of the journey and being a Test player, and it's something that you have to understand. Really, it's not something that you can experience in county cricket. So. Using the people around you, having a real clear understanding of what's going on, what's actually happening, and really trusting that is really important.
And how are you with the other formats? I mean, are you still chasing T20 a bit? We talk about obviously 100 tests, but that other part of the game is still out there, and are you still eager to be very much a central part of that?
I absolutely am. Yeah, I'd love to be a part of that World Cup squad. I love playing all three formats. Everything is a different challenge. I find them all great fun in different ways. I haven't had opportunities to play a huge amount of 2020 cricket in the last few years, but also I'm very aware of the guys that have got those spots at the minute. They're playing some amazing cricket, and there's some brilliant players in there that fully deserve a shirt. And all I can do is, if I get an opportunity, is try and score as many runs as I can when it comes to those 2020 games. And for me, the most important thing is that England go to that World Cup with the strongest squad, and we give ourselves the best chance of winning out there. And hopefully, I can be a part of that squad. But if not, I'll be backing those guys to the hill, because it'd be a huge achievement off the back of what we achieved in the 50th World Cup. And as I mentioned, there's some wonderful batters within that current team.
Yeah. And how hungry are you for stats, Joe? I mean, are you one of those batsmen who is driven by the stats and numbers and averages, and people are always comparing you with Kohli and Williamson and Smith and all of those things? I mean, does that bother you, or is it part of what you are, or does it drive you on?
I've never really been one for numbers. I've been more about winning games, and I think obviously if you're scoring big runs, you're helping the team go and do that. So I think there is a little bit of a crossover, but more importantly is how many games you can affect and how many games can you really contribute to help England win. And that's always been my mindset. That will always be my mindset. And of course, at the end of my career, I'll probably look at things slightly differently. But for now, all I'm concerned about is doing my part for the team. And the majority of the time, that is trying to score as many runs as I can in a given situation.
Well, these run-outs, 8 I think it is now, that's even more than boycott.
Well, there's about 5 of them in the last year, so they need to come to a stop. But
yeah,
unfortunately, it's an unfortunate part of the game. It's something that's avoidable, and a couple of them have been slightly unlucky. But that's something you want to try and eradicate from your game, and make it harder for you to be got out. So hopefully that's the end of them.
Just the last one. I was talking to Alistair Cook the other day. And we were talking about you, obviously, and he said at 30 he would have had no idea at all that he was going to retire at 33. How do you feel at 30, and how long are you going to keep going for? And would it surprise you if you suddenly felt a bit done by 33?
Who knows? You know, I at the minute, the way I see things is I want to play for as long as possible. I love playing for England. I love playing cricket. I love this format, and you know, I want to see myself play as long as I'm still enjoying it. And you know, for now, I can't see when that's going to stop. So I you know, look at someone like Jimmy and Brody and those guys, and the way that they just keep going and keep finding ways to motivate themselves and find new challenges. And they just seem to be getting better and better. And they're a great inspiration for someone like me at the point of my career that I'm at. I just want to play as much as I can. So hopefully that fire and that drive stays there, and you know, I can keep going.
Yeah. Well, enjoy your big day Friday, Joe. I know you'll say the team comes first and all that, but it's a shame your family can't be there.
It is a bit of a shame, but I'm sure they'll be watching on, and hopefully they can really enjoy it as much as I will.
Well, they can't be out there watching him, but we'll hear from his parents, Matt and Helen, soon. First, though, we'll hear from his mentor and confidant, Michael Vaughan, and his first England captain, Sir Alistair Cook, who told me what Root was like on his first England tour back in 2012.
He came on that tour. Actually, I saw him in a one-day game. I think the first time I ever saw him, it was a one-day game, Essex versus Yorkshire. We got promoted for the Division 2 4 days after the day before. We drove up to Headingley and had a one-day game, the last game of the season. Then he opened the batting. He cannot have been more than, I'm going to say 17. I want to say 16 actually, nice. But he looked 12. He did look 12, and he got 60 off 60 balls. You know, maybe not quite what was needed in a 40-over game, but you just saw he had something about him. I remember talking to the Essex lads. I said, he looks so organised for a 16-year-old, and then obviously he was around for a bit, and then came, obviously did well enough. I don't quite know how well he did for Yorkshire over the period, but then came on that tour to Nagpur and played in that last game. And
why did he play? Because it was an important game, that wasn't it? Was someone ill, or what happened? Can you remember?
So he replaced Samit Patel. So
right, you played a batsman rather than an all-rounder.
Yeah, so it got to a stage where during that tour, Samit batted at 6 and was like our third spinner. Yeah. You know, behind we played in the first game. We played 3 seamers and 1 spinner, and then realised that wasn't right, and then played 2 spinners. You know, played Monty and Graham Swan for the next 2, alongside Samit Patel, obviously for his all-round capabilities, but actually with no disrespect to Samit, because how well Monty and Swanee bowled, we didn't need that extra option of the left armour.
Yeah. And a draw was enough, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So we went for the extra batter, and in the nets, if you're kind of asking us who was a really good player, a spin out the whole team already, you'd have said whoever looked the most comfortable would have been Joe Root. So it was a brave call in one way, but actually, you know, very sensible to strengthen our batting, and also, as we've seen here, but we've seen it over his Test match career, what a good player of spin he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on then, Michael. Take us back to your beloved Sheffield Collegiate. I mean, you've obviously known the Root family a long time, and a family really steeped in the love of cricket as well.
I used to play with his dad, Matt, for Sheffield Collegiate. I think more in the thirds and the seconds. His granddad, Don, was a part of we called them the Sheffield Collegiate Mafia. That used to travel and follow. There was about 4 or 5 elderly gentlemen with the chairs every Saturday wherever we play, whether it was Castleford, Scarborough, and they'd be watching us. I just remember both Billy Root, his brother, and Joe just being around the grounds all the time, playing cricket with one of those orange wind balls, coming into the dressing rooms and you know, picking up people's bats and taking them out, and you'd have to try and have a look in your bag to make sure that the bats were there at the end of the day's play. You know, the one thing I always remember at Sheffield Collegiate, that Billy was very talented, and he's doing well at Glamorgan now. It's taken him a little bit of time.
Good move for him, that.
Yeah, it's done really well for him. And everyone said, look at Billy, he's got all the tricks, he can play all the different shots. Even back then, you know, he could play all the sweeps and the reverse sweeps. He bowled all sorts, leg spin, seamers, you name it, he could do everything, Billy. But I always used to look at Joe, who was quiet, but he was just going about his business in a very mature way, even though he was a young player. And my brother actually captained him for the second 11 at Sheffield Collegiate. And I always remember my brother ringing me and saying, oh, he's a real player, and what we're going to do, we're just going to let him open the batting. It doesn't matter how many runs he gets, it doesn't matter how many balls he chews up, we'll have to get a few runs around him as senior, older players, but we want to give him a chance to really kind of thrive as a player. And he used to keep ringing me and saying, this kid can really play. He's a really, really good player. And then obviously he progressed through to the first team. Then I got to see him a little bit more at Yorkshire. You know, I've told the story many times, but one of the main reasons I retired was because of Johnny Bairstow and Joe Root playing in the second team at Yorkshire. I was knackered in the first team, my knee was gone. I wasn't playing great, I couldn't train as hard as I wanted, and I kept on sitting on a physio's bed during the games, you know, coming off from fielding, looking at the TV screen, watching other sports rather than focusing on cricket. And then the phone call would always come, and it would always be that Johnny Bairstow and Joe Root got another 100 in the second team, and I'd be like, oh, they need to be playing, you know, I'm wasting up a young player's spot here. And that was one of the reasons that, you know, I kind of moved aside. But the one thing that always stands out about Joe, and I think it stems from his family and the love of the game, he's so enthusiastic about cricket. You know, it really drives him into being this player. He just loves playing the game. Whether, you know, it's a fourth day in Gaul as England captain, under pressure, I don't think it really matters. He could go back to play for Sheffield Collegiate in the summer, and he'd have the same enthusiasm, same love for the game. He'd be the same person, which I think, you know, we probably don't mention it enough. He's a great person, great around people, just loves the game, loves talking cricket. Bit of a cricket badger, you'd say, Cookie. You'd say he's a bit of a cricket badger, but I think that's what's making him to get to 100 tests, and, you know, he's going to play many, many more. He's going to get thousands more test match runs, and it's because of that enthusiasm that he drives with.
Yeah. It's interesting. You say the same person, but I think an area in which he has had to change has been. He's naturally a bit of a comedian, isn't he? I mean, he's a bit of a character in the dressing room. I'm thinking of those Bob Willis impersonations and all that sort of stuff. And his first little period as captain, I felt he was still trying to keep that a little bit, but actually he's realised that as captain of England, you can't, and he seems to be much more, certainly out the public persona of Joe Root now is a much more sort of straight-laced, more mature individual, Alistair.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think he's really grown into the leadership role. I don't think like being captain of England has been natural for him in terms of that. You know, you'd say that Andrew Strauss was a natural leader, Michael Vaughan, I would say, natural leader, and I don't think Joe Root is in terms of that kind of stuff. But you know, you're talking about the love of cricket. His love to be the best, you know, captain batsman he can be has driven him to work at it incredibly hard. So yes, he's had to change a little bit of his, you know, his character in the dressing room. As you remember the Bob Willis mask, but that wasn't, you know, that wasn't it. The walkout at Nagpur, remember that, he wasn't wearing a helmet. He was so proud of his England cap. He walked out with a massive smile on his face. So this is just the best thing in the world to be playing cricket for England. Almost not believing that he was there, cap on, and played beautifully with that smile. Every time he did anything, he had a smile on his face. Obviously, it's a bit different now, the slightly more serious nature of his role and kind of his senior responsibility. But, you know, that love and determination to get better as a leader is unbelievable. And, you know, he wins today and he goes, you know, one win short of Michael's record, and you know everyone has criticised his captaincy in one way, but that's an unbelievable win ratio, and winning all these games at the moment in the subcontinent with this side, it is his side now, isn't it? And he's earned the right for that.
Yeah, I think what impresses me more about him than anybody that I've kind of talked cricket with is his kind of drive for getting better all the time. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, I thought he was a world-class performer. And I remember he got 100 at, I think it was at Trent Bridge in a one-day game. He played brilliantly. And it was a day-night game. I can't remember who it was against. And I remember I was driving back home, and the phone rang, it's Joe. And I said, oh, hello, Joe. And he said, hi, Mike. He said, anything for me? I went, oh, fantastic. And he said, did you see anything that could improve my game? And I thought it was one of the great one-day hundreds. I was like, well, I never got a one-day 100, but I wouldn't have been driving home, by the way. I'd have been celebrating, doing something else. But I think that's what drives him on. Even last week when he got his double, I had a nice few text messages with him, and again he said, is there anything that you've seen? And that wasn't on this bat, just on captaincy. Is there anything that you've seen? He's always asking that question. Is there anything that you've seen that I could improve or the team could improve upon? And I think that's very important. I had people that I used when I was captain. No one really knows who they were or who they are. There's one or two actually not involved in the game that I would use to just try and drive me on as a leader. Is there anything that I said that I could have said differently, and things like that? Whereas Joe is, anything tactically that I could have done differently, anything that you feel that we could have improved as a team. And I think it's a real lesson to anyone that wants to be the best, and he is up there with the best, and he will be in years gone by, be talked about as one of the greatest, if not, you could argue, the greatest player across all the formats. You think that he's such a good player in 2020 cricket. The way that he plays spin, I guess, let's be honest, he's got to be involved in the T20 World Cup in India. He has to be.
Yes,
the
indeed.
way that he plays the spinners. And then he's a brilliant 50-over player. He hasn't got the Chris Gale style power, but he's such a wonderful player across all three formats that I do think in time we will be talking about Joe Root as being England's best ever batsman.
How was he in Australia, Alistair, when he got dropped? Early on, what was it, 13-14, wasn't it? And he was batting out of position. He had a pretty gruesome time and got left out. I mean, in some ways, it's good for you, I think, early in your career to have a bit of a setback and reflect and have a look at where you are. And that possibly, I think more than possibly, I think it does potentially make you a better player as a result. But it's not very easy at the time to take that.
No, I mean, that was a tough tour for everyone. And actually, for me, I think he might have scored more runs than me up to that game, and I was the one who told him we were leaving him out of that last game. Maybe actually, I can't actually remember the reason. Probably for his own good, in one sense. Just take him out the firing line for that last. It was only the last Test match at Sydney, where the wheels had pretty much come off that tour. It was a disaster, and it was almost, he's obviously a young man at that stage, and we left him out of that one game, and he took it terribly, as in it broke his heart telling it, and also me telling him, watching it. He almost had tears in his eyes, and he was very quiet. But for the next day, but obviously around the lads, he was as good as gold, as running out the drinks, being 12th man. But then obviously the tour ended. I can't remember if he was on the one-day leg of that tour or not, but when we got back to Lords, he was straight back into the side against Sri Lanka, which seems to be probably his favourite team. His record against them is phenomenal, and he got a big double 100, didn't he? And it was that real, I'm here to stay now. I've had that little blip. I know how tough Test cricket can be in Australia. That's the standard I've got to get to. And he just went away. There was no sulking again. Worked incredibly hard at his game. I think he turned up physically in better nick. He obviously put in a lot of hard yards away from the spotlight, and he's kind of just flown from there. And when I saw him in Nagpur, I don't think even I would have said he'd have been as good as he is now. I think he's almost improved beyond what I thought. He was always going to be a very, very good player, but I didn't think he was going to be as good as that. And that's the only credit. The person who can take credit for that is himself. That real drive, and determination to work as hard as he has done, and be a great team man as well. You talked about people in the dressing room, England dressing room, who they love playing cricket with, and they would say Joe Root right up there.
They talked about the big four, didn't they, for 4 years or so ago. Kohli, Williamson, Smith, and Root was in that group. Then he has dropped out of that, rather. I think he just dropped out of the top 10, didn't he, of batsmen. I mean, does he deserve to be still talked about in those terms, do you think, along with those other three?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is such a big year for him, and he started it so well. The India 4 tests away, massive series for him, the way that he plays spin, potentially 2 against New Zealand at home, 5 against India at home, then the Ashes. The one thing I think that is probably missing on in his kind of the history books, if you like, is to dominate an Ashes series. He's done okay against Australia. He's played nicely, but I think he can dominate an Ashes series, particularly away from home. He's yet to get a century away from home against the Aussies. I think that's right. I'm just Cookie, you're the statter.
He's he definitely won the Compton Miller medal with. Did he get 300s in the 2015 series?
Yeah, but I'm talking a real domination.
Like a monster one.
Yeah, domination. He's that good a player. Steve Smith style. That we've seen Steve Smith twice now.
Yeah.
Kind of be this standout individual player. I certainly think he's good enough, and I think that one thing that he's missing is in Australia. Can he go and be England's real lead player? With a team that I believe will have a sniff. They'll have a sniff of winning in Australia in a few months' time, but it will need Joe Root. I don't think he'll need to, and I hope he doesn't have to get as many runs individually as he's doing now. and I hope he gets more kind of support around him. But I do think that he's got that little tick to kind of produce to really put him in that real superstar status of English Test match history.
I mean, he scored 6 trophies. He scored 6 50s, but no, he hasn't scored 100 in Australia.
I know on the last couple of years his figures haven't been, you know, like the averaging 60, but he's still averaging 40 over those 2 years. Yeah, and it's not easy when 7 of your games are in English conditions every single year. You know, you don't get a whole 12 months of, you know, absolute for 18 months there you're an overseas player. Sometimes you go to India, Australia. India is your, you know, your away games, your home games. If you're an Indian player, you got to go to Australia, it's flat, and then you come back to India. So it is hard to always be amazingly good in England with the conditions as they are, because sometimes they are consistently in the bowler's favour. So it's not as if he did dreadfully averaging 40. You know, that would have been England's highest average player over those periods by probably quite a long way as well. So, but I think we've just seen in these last 2 innings the real determination to change that conversion rate and say, I don't need to dominate the bowlers. I don't need to take the game away from them, but in 5th gear, like a one-day mode, I will bat in 3rd gear. Be a little bit more selfish in one sense, knowing how important that daddy 100 is to the England side, even if it takes a little bit longer, rather than trying to do it all in one day, trying to do it single-handedly and take the game away from the opposition. A bit like, say, Kevin Peterson in a day. Joe Root can do it in a day and a half at very, very low risk.
I just wonder how long he'll go. I mean, he's 30. He's got about 4,000 runs to overtake you, Cookie.
Oh, he'll fly past that. I have no doubt.
Do you think
about
he
it.
will? Because I think if I'd asked you that when you were 30, whether if you carried on a bit longer than you did, I don't know. I think the captain takes a lot out of you, doesn't it? And there's a lot going on, and he's done. You know, he's coming towards 4 years, 3 years, 4 years as captain now. It's coming to that cycle. Yeah. When there can be some burnout, but from what you've been saying about him and what Michael's been saying about it, it seems to be as if would he be able to just retire to the ranks and carry on as a batsman? I mean, he's had enough of the captaincy. It's taken a bit of him. Yeah,
I definitely think he would. How many times has he played a Test match for England, and then he's a bit different to me, and then he went back about 2 days later to play for Yorkshire in the T20 because he was desperate to go and get in the T20 side. You know, there's a couple of things like that. You don't know. Again, at 30, I would never have thought I'd have retired at 33.
No.
And I think that there is a big shift once you've been captain to go back into the ranks and mentally. And the only other thing you don't know, do you, the mental side of being in the bubble. How long is living in a bubble with his young family going to affect him in terms of his longevity? But you don't know the answer to that question. You don't know, and hopefully physically he's fine. But in terms of pure talent, you know, hunger, and ability, you know, he should probably fly past that record. And he will deserve it.
I honestly think, Aggers, it'll all depend, you know, a lot on the Ashes this year. If he can have a really good Ashes series, and if he can get the Ashes back as a captain, I think we'll have a captain that go on for quite a long while. If that goes wrong, as Cookie says, you just don't know how mentally that'll affect him, because if he loses or doesn't win one of the 3 Ashes series that he's captained in, it's very difficult for him to carry on, you know, from Australia if it goes badly. If it goes well, I think he'll carry on, and then he has to get back into the ranks as a player. If there's one, I mean, it was like Alistair when he went back into the ranks. I didn't have any queries that he would be able to just sit in the dressing room and just be a player again, because he's a good guy. And I think Alistair Cook will be exactly the same. Joe Root will be exactly the same. He'll just go and be the player. I'll state now, if his back stays fresh and it stays okay, I reckon he'll be playing for England. He'll be the Jimmy Anderson of the batting brigade. He'll just carry on playing. No one's going to stop Joe Root from playing cricket for England if he's fit enough to do so.
Follow England's Tour of India via the TMS podcast, with a new episode at the end of each day's play.
That was Michael Vaughan and Sir Alistair Cook. So let's finish with his parents, Matt and Helen.
So let's start with you, Matt. What are you going to be doing on Friday morning?
Well, pretty much the same as I was doing first time he played for England, I think. I can remember the tour he was selected on. He didn't play in the first 3 tests, and we flew out for the first 2. Hoping that he might get picked, but he didn't. So I think they picked him in the 4th test, hoping to firm up the series. They were leading going into that. So we were back in England. We couldn't get back out because we didn't have a visa. So we had to watch it on TV, but it was a great occasion. I don't think you ever, watching your kids play, you never fully relax when they're out there. It gets a little bit easier as they play more and more. But I remember that first test was really nerve-wracking, and it's just great that he did so well in it.
I was saying to him in our chat, Helen, how small he looked when he walked out to bat in Nagpur in his first test. I just remember this. He was very young, and he looked young as well, didn't he then?
Yeah, he did. He's not looking quite as young now, but still looks really fresh-faced. But
it's clearly been rather more of a steely character though than that very young-looking boy who walked out to bat that first time, though.
Yeah, much more Sheffield steel than it appears at first.
And who does he get that from, Matt?
Oh, his mother, definitely.
But it is true, isn't it? I mean, Matt, he did. I just said to him, he just looked. He looked like not like a young boy, but he did look young going out and playing. And he was saying there's Sachin Tendulkar, there's Kevin Peterson, who's sort of pinching himself as he walked out to make this debut in Nagpur.
Yeah, I mean, he always looked quite young as a kid. He wasn't particularly tall for his age. He had a bit of a growth spurt when he was about 17, but. As you can imagine, when he was sort of 12, 13 playing in men's cricket, he got a lot of balls up around his ears. So, that shot he played sort of backward of square off the back foot, he scored a lot of runs through there. And I think that's why he plays off the back foot so well. But yeah, he's always, when he played for England for that first time against the Australians, I think he got a bit of stick from the Aussies for looking quite young. But yeah, but even though he looks quite young, he's got a fairly mature head on his shoulders, particularly good.
Yeah. What was it like in those early days then, Helen? You got two boys. You can tell that they love cricket. They've got a passion for cricket. You've got a husband who's playing as well. You must have been torn in all sorts of directions, weren't you? Looking after them all and getting them all the various games on time and so on.
Yeah, well, but we managed quite well because Grandpa Don would help out frequently. So between us, we got it sorted. So
yes.
Don, especially if I was working, Don would take he went to all over. He went up to Cumbria and
he got rained off twice at Sedborough.
Yeah.
No.
Without pulling a ball. Yeah.
What was it, Matt? You've got. I suppose then in those days it was your club cricket that sort of took priority, did it?
Yeah. I can remember, the kids would come along and just play at the side of the pitch, and I remember them bringing in this sort of this age group limit to how many overs you could bowl. I think it was six overs at the age of 14 or 15, and they just made a mockery of that. Really, they'd be in the nets from the moment we got to the pitch till we dragged them out after close of play. So, but in those days, Joe and Billy would be playing along the side of the pitch, playing quite well, and people would say, they're Matt Root's lads, those, and. Of course, now I'm Joe and Billy Root's dad, It's changed.
But was it quite a hard school? I mean, you mentioned about Joe playing and having big Yorkshire fast bowlers sticking the ball around his head and so on at a young age. I mean, it was pretty tough cricket, was it? Especially for a kid to be playing. Yeah.
I mean, at that age, he trained with the first team, and I can remember. Because a few years earlier, Michael Vaughan was at collegiate, and when he was a 15, 16-year-old, he had Kenny Benjamin bowling at the nets at him. So it's a tough school, and I think you cope with it quite well, even at a very early age.
Yeah. How did you feel, Helen, when he was, and Billy, of course, as well, with playing against these men and so on, and you were sitting on the sidelines? Did you sort of fear for them?
Well, not really. No. If they practice hard enough, if they miss one, don't they?
Yeah.
No, they were. I felt quite confident about it.
Where did you feel then, Matt, that these both boys, let's be fair, both boys were going to kick on and actually become professional cricketers? I mean, forget the England bit for a moment, but just when could you tell, do you think, that they were actually better than most?
Quite early, yeah. I think that you can sort of tell at a reasonably early age, sort of early teens, whether or not there's likely to be a chance they could play first class cricket. And I think the first hurdle is, are they going to be good enough to make a career out of it? That's a fairly big decision to make about it. Not much later than that. And then, of course, it's a question of how far can they go. I don't think you can ever look at a young teenager and say, they're going to be good enough to play for England. People do say that, but there's a lot that can go wrong between sort of 13 and 20. A lot of things. Cricket's the most important part of their life at that age, but it isn't always going to be. And it's how they deal with that, I suppose.
So there, the sort of cricket enthusiast has to give way to the parent you as well a bit, and you're thinking of their futures and whether or not that it's worth pursuing and putting all this time in, and universities or whatever options there might be. The sort of the parental side kicks in to make sure they're making the right decision, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose it does, and it's. I mean, I think the hardest decision is when they get to sort of 13, 14, 15. Is handing them over. They go play in the county, and you've got to just be brave enough to say, okay, I've done my bit now. I've got them interested in the game. Let's hand it over to the professionals, and that's quite difficult. But they were both fortunate enough to go into the Yorkshire system, the Yorkshire Academy system, which is pretty good at picking up kids that age and developing them into cricketers.
Yeah. What are they like around the house, Helen? I mean, in the garden, were they playing cricket all the time, or were there other sports as well that they took up?
They played a lot of cricket in the house, on the drive. I was forever hearing them knocking bats in. That used to drive me potty. Yeah.
Two of them at once.
Yeah.
Oh.
A cricket ball in a sock, and then they progressed to some sort of mallet thing. Ooh, it used to drive me mad.
And what did they fight? Were they competitive? Were they always falling out, or was it good-natured stuff?
Well, it used to get a bit tense because Billy had to get Joe out so that he could bat. Finally get him out, and then he'd be out 3 balls later, and then Joe would be back in again.
There was a famous time in a Yorkshire League game at Scarborough where the game had to be stopped while I went off the field. I was fielding to go and break up a fight because that just happened. He was chasing Joe down the pitch with his bat.
Yeah. But that's lovely though. It's difficult being a parent, I think, and I know you see a lot of stuff, particularly like footballing fathers mainly, and mothers too. Let's be fair, being just too pushy and really all over their kids, and almost also, and you as a decent cricketer, Matt. I mean, almost pushing your career and your ambitions through your children, and they're under real pressure. How did you manage to cope with that?
Well, I mean, we never had to force them to play. It's they just wanted to play at every opportunity. So I think all you can do as a parent is give them the opportunities. Provide them with the opportunities to go and play, and give them as much support and encouragement as possible. I think it's one thing that we tried to do was just to try and make them feel that they were good, that were exceptionally good players and believing themselves. Because I think a lot of cricket, a lot of sport is between the ears, isn't it?
Yeah. Could you sometimes see issues? I mean, Joe didn't have a great year last year. I mean, he didn't have a bad year, but by his own standards. I mean, and then he went away and worked really hard in the autumn and so on. Could you see things? I mean, do you know his game well enough, and being a batsman yourself, that you might just see something, and do you offer it to him, or do you just keep completely out of it now?
I do actually, yeah. I mean, I don't think he listens to me anymore. But what I do know from talking to him after games, he seems to be at the time thinking the same sort of things that I was thinking when I watched it. I was saying, did you consider this? And yeah, or his emotions seem to be in tune with mine when he's out there. But so which I didn't realise at first. It's only over the years that I've come to realise that we're sort of thinking the same things at the same time. So now it's quite interesting because I think whatever I'm thinking, he's probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And how do you, Helen? How do you cope with criticism and media criticism and stuff that you read in the papers? If Joe's having a rough time or something, how do you handle that?
Well, I've come to the decision that I'm only going to read the good news. Otherwise, you could just get too upset. And obviously, people are entitled to make points about his game and what he could or couldn't do, and what he might need to improve on, etc. But I really hate doing this. That's great. But
You mean people like Agus criticising him all
No,
the time?
no.
Well, we had a bit of a bust up.
The thing is, it's going to happen, and I've been guilty of making the same sort of criticisms of other sports cricketers or tennis players or anything. And then when it becomes, more personal, you get a bigger picture. You see a bigger picture, and you just have to know. I mean, particularly social media platforms.
Oh yes.
You just really have to just keep off them, but. Sometimes I enjoy reading the articles, but mostly try to stick to reading all the good news, and
I think it does,
and not get hung up on any of the more critical articles.
I think it gives you a good appreciation of professional sports people and what they're going through. I've got it for my sins. I've got a season ticket at Bramall Lane. So I go down there, and before I open my mouth to criticise, I'm thinking the same things that that there are people talking about Joe and Billy, about being critical. So it does give you an appreciation of what people are going through, certainly.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship, isn't it? I mean, I think I've got a good relationship with Joe actually, but every now and then, you're in the heat of the moment, you ask a tough question or something, and it's not always easy, is it?
No, and I think there's a lot of frustration that sort of comes out. I can imagine you've been toiling away for 6 hours in the dirt on field, and you come off the pitch and someone sticks a microphone in front of you, and things haven't gone particularly well. It's easy to lose your cool, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I mean, what a start it's had to this year. I mean, as we just look ahead to this Test match and his 100th and everything else. I mean, he couldn't, apart from having to sit in his hotel room for 6 days. I mean, he couldn't really have asked for a better build up to it, could he?
No, he's really applied himself well. I think he's always been pretty good against spin. He's always judged length well, and I remember throwing some balls at him in the nets last year, and with a dog thrower, and I couldn't believe how far up I had to pitch it before I could get him on the front foot. And when they're on spinning pitches in the subcontinent, he sort of comes into his own. I just hope he can continue that form into the next series against India.
Mm.